Hey everybody, it's your friend and your guy, Gardner. I wanted to do something different today. It's a beautiful snowy day here in Maine, and I've been working on some coding stuff. Now, if you know anything about me, if you've seen me on YouTube or whatever, you probably know that I love video games. But if there's anything that I am more passionate about than video games, it's web design. I love making websites. And so I wanted to do something different, and that's why we're doing this. So, what I'm looking to do here is to talk about web design, JavaScript, CSS, HTML, and PHP. Those are my preferred languages. I have a lot of fun doing it, and I wanted to share some cool stuff that I'm learning on my web design journey. Now, I've been a web designer for, I got my start in web design in high school making MySpace profile designs for my friends. I ended up getting paid by several of my friends in order to actually make custom CSS for their MySpace profiles. And let me tell you, that was an education. Things have evolved since then, though. And one of the things I want to talk about today is relative colors in CSS. Relative colors in CSS is an absolute game changer. I posted this over on Mastodon, and that's kind of what inspired me to make this video. So, without further ado, let's actually talk about relative colors, how they work, how you can use them, and how powerful they really are. So, I've got a simple setup here. This is a very badly designed blog post, and we've got some other stuff here. But essentially what matters here is our theme.css and our index.html. We've got some other style stuff here. We've got a reset that this is like my basic reset that I like. We'll go over that later if you guys are interested. But essentially theme.css. This is where we're defining a basic set of colors, and then we're actually using CSS relative colors to fill in the blanks, if you will, to define a wider palette from the 5 colors that we're specifying. I believe it's 5. There's brand color 1, primary color 1, so that's 2. Then there's background color, that's 3. Neutral color, that's 4. And issue, that's 5. And then there's also a body font color, but I'm also kind of skeptical if I even need this. So we have 5 colors that we're defining. And then we're using a bunch of math to like derive a wider palette. And don't worry, this looks complicated. It kind of is, but also once you understand what it's doing, it's actually not that complicated at all. But we're going to start with some basics for relative color. What is relative color? That's the first question that we should answer. Relative color is a new way to deal with colors in CSS. You can use any color function that you would normally use, so RGB, HSL, OKLCH, which is a newer color function, and you can actually import any other color in any format that you would use into the color function, which will then split it into the 3 different channels and an alpha value. This is so cool because, my God, this was so much more difficult to do, and all of the hacky workarounds that I had to implement to get this stuff working was ridiculous. So that's relative color. This is the basic overview, and now let's actually look at some examples. So let's take this button, for example. You can see when I mouse over this, white text on the lighter blue background there would be hard to read. So let's actually set up some code here. We're going to go into our styles. We're going to scroll down. We don't really need to deal with any of that stuff quite yet. And let's just go a.button, which is a selector for this. You can see here we have our class of button. It is an A tag. And so we're going to go back in here and we're going to say background. And let's just set a value of green. Now you can see we have green. That's great. Green, you know, green is a built-in CSS color. That's really cool. Now, let's also then set our color to white, which it already is white, but we're going to do that for purposes here. Now, what we're going to do is if we hover over this, you can see that this is just overriding the hover values that I have set elsewhere. So I'm going to do an ampersand. This is how you can do nested values in CSS. If you don't understand this syntax, basically the ampersand is a placeholder for the current selector. If we were doing this traditionally, we could move this down here and replace the ampersand with an a dot button, and then and then this would be effectively the same selector. These two. I like this better because it lets us contain all of the relevant styling for an element, like a component, if you will, within the one selector. So if you're watching this channel, this is how I'm going to be doing pretty much all of my selecting from now on. So now we have our selector here, and let's say that we want to do background, and we want the background to become brighter. So we'll use background color here just because that'll make things a little easier. All right, so now what we want to do is we want to have that same shade of green. We just want to make it a little bit brighter. This is super, super neat. All right, let's do this. HSL, all right? And what HSL is going to be the hue, saturation, and luminance values. So we're going to this is a color function in CSS, so we can just say from, and what that's going to do is it's going to use whatever value we pass in next as a color that is going to be imported and then split into the relative values of H, S, and L. So let's say HSL from, and then we're going to say green, okay? Now, the cool thing is we can just say H space S space L, and nothing's going to change here yet. So we can do calc, and we can like multiply it by like 1.1. And you can see now it gets a little bit brighter. So if we do 1.2, boom. See how it's getting brighter there? We could desaturate or saturate the color more if we wanted to. We could say calc times 1.2, and this will make it more saturated. And this is some of the coolest stuff that you can do with relative color here. So you can see that we have the value of green being passed in here, and then we are splitting that out into relative values that can then, or essentially these are variables that we can then perform calculations on. But one of the cool things we can also do is if we do S instead, and we do 70%. Now you can see we don't even need to do any calculation on this. We could do 10%, and now it's 10% of it, 50%. So basically these three values are going to work just like they do when specifying an HSL or an RGB or anything like that. Because we can do this. If we wanted to do RGB instead, now these are not going to be HSL, they're going to be R space G space B. And then what we can do here is we can say we want to calc B plus 40. And when we hover, why is that not working? Maybe it is. Plus 80. Yeah, you can see it's very subtle. It's probably because there isn't much blue. There is no blue in green at all. So if we do like, 150, now it's making it a little bit more turquoise, which is super, super cool. But we're not limited to just green. So let's say that this is EF0D42. I don't know what this color is, but it's kind of red. Now we'll save, it's a reddish pink. That's pretty cool. And we can copy this down here, and now we're making it even more pink when we hover over it. Very neat. But there's a lot more that we can do. So if you are not aware, you can actually now specify a slash and then any alpha value. So right now A is just 1 because this is there's no alpha channel in this color. But we could do like 0.3. And now it's an alpha. We've added alpha to this color. Actually, if we just get rid of this, this is a really neat way of just adding an alpha value to a hex color. I mean, that was almost impossible to do unless you use some kind of preprocessor or something else. And it was so cumbersome, and this makes me very, very excited for the future. Now, duplicating our values like this, that kind of sucks. So what we can do is specify a reddish blue or a reddish pink, right? And then we'll put our hex value in there, and then we'll say var reddish pink, and we'll come down here and say var reddish pink. Awesome. That's super great. I love that. I love that. But we can even go a little bit further. So what we could do is we could say color. Then we could say, doesn't matter what we're doing here, RGBA, whatever. And we'll say from current color, which is a keyword that, you know, pulls in the current color of our text. And then we'll just make it that 0.5. So we're pulling in black because the hover is inverted, but whatever. You get what I'm saying. We can make this black here, which is awesome. Dude, there's so much that we can do here. We don't really need this anymore. Let's come back here. Now, you might be wondering, what if you say GBR? Well, that works too. So what we're doing with this is we are shifting these color channels to the left by 1, right? So instead of it being RGB, now it's GBR. The potential here is almost limitless in terms of color values. So now that we're somewhat familiar with the relative color syntax, I want to show you what I've been working on here. Now, let's go over here to swatches. And you can see that I've specified a few colors. We have base colors here. The base color is set to 1, and then we're generating a slightly lighter color and then a series of darker colors. Guys, before CSS Relative Color, I did all of this on the server side. And it was cumbersome, and it was obnoxious, and it never worked exactly the way I wanted. And there were always edge cases that I needed to generate slightly different colors. And there wasn't a good way to do that because all of these colors had to be computed on the server side. But now I don't have to do that anymore. I can just specify a base set of colors that I can use for general purposes, but then I can derive new colors in these weird edge cases very easily. Now, how am I doing this? Well, I showed you a little bit of it earlier. Let's go over here to our theme. You can see here that I'm defining some custom properties. These are more vestigial from the engine that I wrote, the server-side engine that I wrote. But essentially, we have some colors like neutral color 1, and we have issue color 1, and we have background color 1 and primary color 1. And then we have these primary increment and primary rotation. For each of the colors that we have, I'm also specifying an increment and a rotation. The increment is controlling the luminance change. So for branding increment, we're only stepping 0.05 down. And then we have our rotation, which is actually affecting the hue. So let's scroll down here. And again, this is going to look very complicated, but if we break this down, we can actually figure out what's going on here. So let's just look at branding 0 first of all. Branding color 0. And we're going to split this off into multiple lines so that it's a little easier to understand. So we have OKLCH, luminance, chrominance, and hue. We're importing branding color 1, and we're splitting that off into our L, our C, and our H. And then what we're doing is we're adding branding increment, and we're adding a fallback in case that doesn't exist, and then we're multiplying that by 1. Okay, so we're taking this luminance value, we're adding 0.1 to it. I believe it's actually 0.05 here. So we're adding this custom property to this luminance value, and then we're multiplying it by 1 because we don't need to actually change it. You can see we're actually going to multiply things by 2, 3, and 4 down here later on. Then we're keeping our chrominance the same, and then we are adjusting our hue by 10 here. I believe this is going to be branding rotation is 10. So yeah, when I do custom properties, I tend to specify a fallback just in case. And these were the most sane fallbacks. But essentially what that does is branding color 0 is now one step, like one shade higher than branding color 0. Now, this might be a little bit weird, but I find that like I often need my like initial color to have one shade higher, but usually a bunch of shades darker. And so that's what I'm doing. Now, if we introduce branding color 2, we're doing the exact same thing here, except now we're subtracting our branding increment from our luminance, and we're subtracting our branding rotation from our hue. Okay. And then we're multiplying by 1 just to keep things consistent with these other ones. So now we have our color 3. Now you can see that we're multiplying our luminance by 2. So that's taking it 2 steps away from branding color 1. And we're also multiplying branding rotation by 2, which takes us 2 steps away. And again, you can see that we're doing the same thing for branding color 4 and branding color 5. And this is all well and good, but if we're going to use these as backgrounds, we need some kind of contrast color to actually display text over that, right? Right. So that's where this comes in. So now we have branding color 0FG, which is for foreground. And this is going to be for any text that's going to live on top of like a div or a button that is colored. The background color is going to be set to branding color 0. We can see that we're actually importing branding color 0. So we're saying from var branding color 0, which is this color here. And then what we're doing is we are doing the same mathematical operation for each RGB value. And so essentially we are multiplying the red by 299, we're multiplying the green by 587, and we're multiplying the blue by 114. Then we're dividing it by 1000 and subtracting 128. Then we're multiplying it by negative 1000. And so what this does is it will take each channel and create either a black, like an absolute black, or an absolute white. Because if you provide a value here that is greater than 255 or less than 0, it just clamps it at either 255 or 0. Now, these are a bit magic numbery, but these are also kind of industry standard values for determining a contrast color for each chroma channel. And this is somewhat of a hack and a workaround because colors, we don't have like actual if statements in CSS. So instead what we're doing is we're just kind of like pushing the values to an extreme. And as far as I've seen, they have never come up with a erroneous contrast color, either full black or full white. Now, realistically, this isn't going to be super optimized. And if someone comes to this not knowing either the from syntax or not knowing what's going on here, I mean, this would be relatively hard to parse, I would imagine. But this is also really cool because now what we're doing, so we have this table and each cell is going to have its background color set. So we're going to have, you know, branding color 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And if we scroll over, we can actually use the same values, but with the foreground color to specify the color of the text in each cell. And if we look, we can see for primary colors foreground, it's black, but then it's white, and it just stays white for the rest. For issue colors, we have 0 and 1 are black, with 2, 3, 4, and 5 being white. And then for neutral colors, that stays black for almost all cells except for 5. So this is a super powerful way of actually specifying this stuff. So if I wanted to go in here and let's just add an FAQ page, and if we come over here to our FAQ, we can see there's nothing here yet, but then we can add some text. So let's say paragraph lorem, and then we'll do another paragraph of lorem text. But let's make this paragraph style, background, and we'll say var primary 3. That's actually going to be hard to read because we're not using our foreground color. So let's specify that. We're going to say color, and we're going to say var primary color 3 dot or slash fg or dash fg, and now it's readable. So yeah, that's kind of where my head's at with this. I actually really love this stuff. And one of the other cool things I want to show you is I'm actually using var branding increment, var primary increment, and stuff like that. So if we come up here, we can actually go back to our swatches and change, let's say, our primary increment to 3. If I refresh the page, now you can see the steps become dark much quicker. We could use a negative value here as well, and it generates an inverted palette. We could also do negative 0.1, and you can see that it generates another negative palette. And then for primary rotation, if we say instead of doing negative 10, we do 10, you can see it becomes more green instead of a little more purple, right? If we do like negative 20, it's going to become really purple. 25, it's going to be even more. If we go like above 50, I've found that it just becomes wonky. But it's just rotating around the chroma circle. Now, there's one more thing that I want to point out here. If we open up our browser tools, we can actually see that this value is not a contrasting color. If we look right here, I'll zoom in on it. This value is not contrasting enough with the background, and the browser accessibility tools are pointing that out to us. This is problematic for a number of reasons. So how can we make this be better? And the answer is actually very exciting here. So we have our branding colors. We have our branding color foreground. So let's go into where we're actually defining our colors for our links. That's going to be here in my reset. And you can see we have anchor element color and we have anchor hover color. So now what we're going to do is we're going to use the color mix. This is a mixing function. So essentially this color mix function takes a color space value and it takes 2 colors and it will mix them together proportionally to how you specify. So we're going to say in HSL. So now you can see what we're doing is we're actually taking in our color variable. We're mixing it in HSL space, the default anchor color, which is going to be primary color 1. And then we're actually going to be combining that. We're going to add 15% of font body color to our link color here. So now you can see if we don't do that, I'm going to undo this and undo visited here. And then you can see that's what it looks like now. And if we come in here and click on this and highlight over that, you can see that we have some contrast issue. And if I add this in and I add this back in, and then we cover over it, now the contrast is 3.31 versus 2.09. So yeah, I think that's pretty neat. It lets us have more control over our links. And you might be wondering, like, what's this underscore for? Well, that's my personal best practice for specifying colors, because I don't want to have to come in if I want to like restyle links. I don't want to have to like do all of this extra stuff, all these extra selectors every time. I can just, if I make a new anchor link, I can just add these 4 colors here, and then as custom properties to the link, and then it will automatically add these the color mixing here, and it will automatically change the values of the visited, hover, and active variables. In fact, I just realized I could probably just do this instead. Anchor element color, and then that is going to make it so that the visited color always follows the element cover, and then I'd only have to do the first 3 here. I think I like that even better, actually. Let's do that. Let's leave it that way. Now, as far as color mix and relative cover goes in terms of browser support, that is going to be the question. Can you use this in the modern web? The answer is we're actually at around 92% of web browsers are able to use this, which is pretty nice, actually. Like, that's getting there. Really, it's going to be, some of these older web browsers that don't support it. QQ browser, I've never heard of. But this is baseline 2024, and it's newly available across major browsers. And there are ways to, fall back to colors in case things don't work. So what we could do is something more like this, where we specify these colors, and we just say var branding color 1. And then if this succeeds, if your browser knows how to interpret the relative color, then it will override these custom properties here, which that's a okay fallback. But I mean, really, we're not going to be missing a whole lot of browser targets using this right here. I don't know if I'd use this in production per se right now, but within the next couple of months, I think it'll be ready to be used in the browser. As far as color mix goes, I'm pretty sure that's going to be fairly well. Yeah, 91%. So we're pretty good on color mix. So I would definitely be using color mix in production, but I don't think I would use relative color quite yet in production. Yeah, I think this is really cool. I'd love to hear your thoughts about my implementation here. I'd love to hear your questions. I'll try to answer them either in the comments, or if it would take too long, maybe in another video. I've had a lot of fun making this. I've had a lot of fun showing you guys the code that I've come up with. If you learned something from this video, make sure you like that smash button. It's the best way to tell YouTube you want to see more videos like this. You can also get subscribed, because I'm going to try to do one of these videos every week. Hopefully you found this interesting, and I will see you in the next one.